Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Like the other military services, the Army has now recovered from the recruiting challenges it faced over the last several years. But even during the peak of those problems, a bright spot was that retention stayed strong. Now the Army is trying to capitalize on that strength by thinking more carefully about which soldiers it keeps and where. As Federal News Network's Jared Serbu reports, the service wants to retain its soldiers in the fields where they're most needed, focus its retention efforts more on officers, and put an emphasis on quality over quantity.
Officials say retention and actively managing it is going to be a major focus area over the coming year, much like recruiting was over the last several years. Brigadier General Gregory Johnson is the Director of Military Personnel Management at Army Headquarters.
If you look back at how we've done retention for the last 40 years, it's really been an aggregate mission. We think about, hey, how do I drive the end strength the Army needs? And then that's the number I come up with from eligible folks that are ETSing either this year or the following year. And we really looked at our team and said, hey, is that driving readiness for the Army? Is that driving the quality we need, the skill sets we need? Is it doing what we need to drive how we respond to ATI and the decisions of Army senior leaders? And there was a collective no. And so our team, and many of them are out in the audience here, have really taken a look at how we get precise in how we look at retention. So we're leaning on and expanding who we retain.
Part of that effort involves creating new quality metrics for enlisted soldiers and then creating new ways to connect retention incentives to those measures of quality over the next several years. But Army officials say they're also recognizing that those incentives don't necessarily need to be financial ones, and that giving soldiers more control over the direction of their careers, where they're stationed, and for how long can be powerful retention incentives too. The service is beginning to apply that idea to officers, including through a program that lets them change to other branches of the Army at earlier points in their careers. Previously, officers needed to wait until their 7th year of service. But starting with Year Group 21, a pilot program began letting members voluntarily transfer into branches that have shortages, like finance, signal, and logistics. Major General Hope Rampey, the commander of Army Human Resources Command, says giving those officers more choices makes sense right now, as retention rates are starting to dip ever so slightly.
But we saw a couple of year groups that had maybe a dip of 1% or a dip of 2%. So I'm not saying there's an issue, but I'm saying there's an indicator. The data is indicating that you're not on a historical trend. So why wait for a problem? And why not get ahead of it? And so I think it's twofold. It's helping to hopefully retain officers, at least at that historical trend. But also, I think it's kind of motivating for the young officers. They're excited. You know, I have a choice. You know, I can change career paths. And we shouldn't push against that. You know, it's okay. And I think it aligns with, you know, Gen Z's passion for service, because I don't think they get enough credit for that. They have a passion for service, but they also want to be challenged. They want to feel valued and purposeful. And that doesn't mean doing the same job forever.
Rampey says the Army plans to announce details for an expanded voluntary transfer program later this month.
We want to show that there's an opportunity to serve a career in the Army, but not do the same thing for the rest of your life. Now there are certain branches that you can leave and certain branches you can go into, or functional areas. And usually you had to be a captain or a major to go into a functional area. And so we have floors, and we have where a certain number that are pre-key and developmental, meaning as a lieutenant you can switch. And then we have certain numbers to protect the functional areas in some of the branches, that they can only have a certain number that are then post-key and developmental, a captain.
Meanwhile, officials are also working on new ways to help nudge soldiers into branches that might be a better fit for them than the one they're currently serving in. That's more possible today than it was a few years ago, because the Army's new Integrated Pay and Personnel System, or IPPS-A, includes self-professed skills and knowledge for every soldier. Army personnel officials are exploring ways to use AI to scrape that data and make better use of it. But Colonel Tom Maleko, the Chief Talent Analytics Officer at Army Human Resources Command, says the Army is also looking to build more structured indices of soldier talent.
For me, it starts with understanding what are the job end requirements. And so the Army, since about 2020, has been on a committed path to understanding what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to perform each role in the Army, whether it is a battalion commander of an infantry formation to whether it is a UAS operator in the 25th Infantry Division. What are those knowledge, skills, and abilities required to perform that? Once we have those, the next step then becomes measuring the competencies and attributes of our individual soldiers. And so one of the things we're looking at developing is known as the Officer Assessment Battery. It's a assessment, and it's really designed to be just one part of a career-long set of assessments that you'll take throughout your time in service to better understand what are your knowledge, skills, and abilities and how are they evolving over time. Fundamentally, once you start to have those two different points of data, then we can start to optimize our job selection. Because from my perspective, when we talk talent management, it's about getting the right soldier in the right job at the right time.
Another area where the Army's hoping to make more use of AI in the promotion board process for its soldiers. Maleko says the main purpose would be to help screen service members as part of a multiple hurdle selection process.
The current process, I think, has served us well, right? It's been a process that's been in place for 7 years and has led to the leader selections that we have today. And so I think really the matter is more we have technology now that'll enable us to be more efficient and more effective over the course of the next 20, 30, 40 years or so. And so thinking about it, can we integrate components of what we would call a multiple hurdle selection strategy, right? Can we screen out individuals that are not really competitive for the process up front, and then helping our board members to focus their valuable time and resources on those individuals that are then most competitive for that selection? And so how can we kind of focus their attention in on those areas where really only humans can make the good judgment call, and then using computers to screen out based on more discrete criterion. If you have not commanded at a certain level yet, if you have not been to a certain type of school, and then letting humans then make those subjective decision judgments that only humans can truly do.
Jared Serbu, Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.
You can find Jared's story at federalnewsnetwork.com.